Hey, how's it going? This is Terra Bro. We're going to be doing a pick a card reading. The topic is what is in your blind spot right now that could cost you? You'll have the choice between five symbols. Pick the one that resonates with you the most. This is usually something that is a gut feeling. Try not to be so mental about it. Try not to think about it. So usually the gut reaction you have, that's the best choice. So I'll put these options up and I'll put them on for a few seconds. The options are an LED symbol, a rune, a musical note, a pyramid, and a pie chart. So take a few seconds. All right. We'll get started first with those who chose the LED symbol. All right, so we got the Three of Cups, we have the Nine of Cups, and we have the Emperor. Okay, so it looks like you belong to some sort of organization. This could be a job, a friendship, um, some sort of social group. You belong to something, and it looks like your participation in that group is contingent on their approval of you. Essentially, they hold your fate in their hands. And what's more is that it looks like you are maybe overstepping your boundaries or maybe overstaying your welcome. You're somehow encroaching upon that individual's comfort. Like maybe they think you haven't earned your seat at the table, or at least not at the rank that they are currently at, and it is potentially becoming an issue. If it's a friend group, maybe you're bypassing the natural order that that friend group has. If it's a job, it could be you are maybe overstepping your bounds, or again, also trying to bypass the natural order of rankings. You don't seem to be an equal, or you're not on equal footing as the person who holds their fate over you. And what fate they hold is going to vary. If it's a job place that this is um, resonating with, then this is going to be something that could potentially be like a supervisor. If it's like a friend group, it would be the alpha or the leader of the group. If it's a different type of social gathering, a social group, then it would be like the alpha. It's essentially the leader or the one who everybody acknowledges as the person who was there before them. I think a good example of this is I was watching this YouTube video of this journalist. He's a like a YouTube only journalist, and he kind of had a big following, so much so that people would recognize him. And he also did some comedy, and he had been to a club owned by Joe Rogan, and everybody knew him, and people would recognize him in the audience, and he didn't want to deal with people recognize him in the audience, and he asked one of the comedians if he can go to the green room, which is a room that's exclusive to just the comedians. And he goes up there, and he's told prior to going in there, be careful because Joe Rogan is a territorial individual. So just be careful when you're up there. And then he's like, okay, yeah, sure. So he goes up there and he's mingling. The comedians in the green room recognize him. They're talking with him and chit-chatting. And Joe Rogan shows up and everything is fine. Joe Rogan does not have an issue with him being there. He may not recognize him, but he's fine. And then the individual, the comedian that we're talking about, he takes it upon himself to grab some popcorn from the cabinets and put it in the microwave, almost like a move to establish himself. And once he's doing the popcorn thing and the time's running, you hear Joe Rogan talking in the back, like, who is this person? And then somebody tells him that he's a journalist, and Joe Rogan flips out because this is a safe space. The green room is a safe place, and he's thinking that the journalist is, just somebody who's, maybe there to stir up controversy, or grab some sound bites. And he's just yelling, how could the bouncers let in a journalist? And at that point, that comedian kind of, takes it upon himself to like, hey, you know what, I got to leave to people nearby him, and then he kind of leaves. But essentially, it's kind of like that situation. Like you are overstepping some sort of boundary. Like you are putting yourself on equal footing of someone who has control over something that you currently belong to. So that's what you're currently not seeing. You are being a certain way. You're acting in a way that is essentially ticking somebody off who is at a higher rank or holds control over something that you currently belong to, whether it be work, friendship, um, things like that. So just, try to pause a bit and run through your life real quick and see, are there any situations where you thought you were killing it, you thought you were cooking, but maybe you actually were maybe being a little bit too much, to where you're making somebody uncomfortable or upset or not liking you, so just think about it, because that may impact you negatively, and affect whatever situation you belong to or whatever group you belong to. All right, next up, for those who chose the rune symbol, what is in your blind spot right now that could cost you? All right, so we have the Empress, we have Six of Wands, we have Seven of Pentacles. All right, so it looks like something is coming to an end. Something that was very plentiful, something that was in abundance. It's coming to an end, and it's going to be time to work hard. If you think of it in terms of work, the work was steady, it was coming. Nobody thought it would ever end, and it's going to dry up or it's going to stop coming in as frequent, enough so that you'll have to make adjustments. You could interpret this also in a social setting, like you were favorable, you had um, everyone backing you, and something suddenly changes, and now you can't coast on your charisma or your likability. Maybe whoever you were reporting to or whoever was the figure that really favored you, maybe they're already out of the picture. Whatever it is, it's going to be based off of wherever you have been smooth sailing. So wherever that is, it's going to come to a stop, and you're going to need to make adjustments. Maybe start making them now. If this is maybe something monetary, save up or make additional um, backup plans, kind of have things ready, kind of ready to jump into another boat should your own boat collapse. I don't think you need to make any life altering moves. I think you just need to have multiple options available should anything turn out unfavorable for you. The severity of this could vary from person to person, and at the worst, it might be a minor inconvenience for you. I think a lot of us have been in situations similar to this. um, like you have a boss that is very understanding, doesn't micromanage, and lets you do your thing so long as you always get everything taken care of. And then all of a sudden, you get a different manager, different boss who is quite the opposite and micromanages and wants to be involved in every part of the process and kind of unsettles your work way, like the way that you complete things. Um, it's going to vary from people to people, and it might not even be the workplace, but just remember, wherever it is that you've been smooth sailing, that's where it's going to hit you. All right, let's move on to those who chose the musical note. What is in your blind spot right now that could cost you? All right, so we have the Page of Swords, we have the Three of Pentacles, and we have the Six of Swords. All right, so it looks like there's currently something that may affect your future or a immediate future, and you have the ability to change this outcome, but you are being too carefree at the moment. It could be maybe you don't want to burden yourself and you think that everything's just going to work out on its own. Well, it actually requires input from you. If you think about it in terms of like work, this could be seen as something where there is a position that's open, and it's maybe like the new manager, and you're a shoo-in for it, but you don't want to trouble yourself with that. And then what ends up happening is somebody that you used to know that was maybe very unqualified, that person becomes the manager, and now you have to report to that person. This could also be some sort of academic test, something that you have to study for, something that you really have to take serious, as it is going to determine some sort of scholarly options for you, and you're just taking it lighthearted. You're taking it too easy. It's almost like you're coasting on the fact that, everything is going to be fine, but you again need input. There's stuff that you need to do on your side. You can even think of it in terms of relationship. Like maybe you have not been carrying your weight in the relationship and you've just been coasting, and there may come a point where it's going to hit the fan. This does feel very contractual, so it has that energy of like a test that needs to be tried, or some sort of trial. Like if you're a student taking that important test, if you're up for a opportunity, going through the trouble of applying and going through the hoops and hurdles. This could even be like some sort of mediation situation, like your input was needed in order to make a decision that should have favored multiple parties. Like imagine being in an accident and having to talk to your insurance people, but you were not involved in the process at all, and because of that, now you get like a very small payout. Or maybe there was like a custody situation and you were not present during any mediation situations, and then you got a very unfavorable outcome. I know that this is a lot of different examples, so I'm trying to kind of paint a picture of where you could possibly see this manifest itself. But the core thing here is that there's something very important that's gonna alter like your immediate future that you're not taking serious, and it's not gonna work out fine unless you actually do something about it. So, whatever you're doing that maybe you haven't touched, that is very important, that could determine, the future outcome. Don't take it lightly. You really, really need to buckle down and take care of it, like put your effort in it, study, whatever pertains to your situation. You need to take it serious. This is not something that you can coast by on. Next up, we have those who chose the pyramid. So what is in your blind spot right now that cost you? Okay, so we have the Hierophant, we have the Five of Swords, and we have the King of Wands. Okay, so it looks like you have a bone to pick with some sort of organization. Maybe you feel wrong and justified and think you need to move forward with this. This could be, higher up management. It could be like some sort of school administration thing. It could even be some sort of like internet entity or some business. Whoever it is that you have a bone to pick with, it looks like the situation is not going to pan out in your favor. But this specifically is in regards to the way that you are jumping into the situation, how you're jumping into this conflict. Looks like you are coming from a angry place, like a place of wanting justice or like retribution. That part of this component about this puzzle, that's the part that is making it so that this doesn't work. Whether or not your situation can be positive, whatever fight you have against, the system or, some sort of organization, whatever outcome you end up having, um, if it comes from a place of anger and aggression, it's doomed to fail. If you've been wronged and you need to move forward with, whatever you need to move forward with, just be calm about it, be smart about it. If you have a system, seek counsel from those you trust. I think most commonly people are going to fall under the work category for this type of spread, but I think secondly, maybe some sort of like school setting. Wherever you are when this hits you, just remember to act calmly if you are proceeding with a situation regarding conflict with an organization. Just make sure you're not coming from an anger. Like make sure you're not hot, like you're not hot-headed. You have to be very tactful with this because even if you are cool and calm, this is not an easy fight. But if you come out of it with aggression, you are most certainly doomed to fail. All right, and finally, for those who chose the pie chart, what is hiding in your blind spot right now that could cost you? All right, so we have the Hierophant, we have the Nine of Wands, and we have the Devil. All right, so it looks like you are currently in a sinkhole. Maybe you thought if you keep at the situation, it would somehow get better. Well, it turns out that it might not. It looks like this is a situation where you've been placed into what may be seen as an opportunity or some role or some position that maybe is doable, but maybe not worthwhile. It looks like who's ever put you up to this does not have your best interest at heart. Like you are being extracted of your resources, your essence, your life energy with no regard to yourself. Usually, if somebody works hard, they sort of expect that there's going to be something at the end of the tunnel. But it looks like in this situation, you are just being extracted for your resources. There's no intention of providing you anything beyond that. You've been essentially trapped. You're kind of like Milton from Office Space. There could have been a time where he may have thought he had a promising career there, and only to eventually end up getting fired, but still working there, unaware that he was fired. It looks like some time during his employment, um, it somehow just fell through the cracks that he was fired, but never informed. And rather than tell him, they just allowed him to keep working and not pay him. And every day he would ask, about payroll and making an error. That's kind of like the same situation. If you haven't seen the movie, I'd recommend it. Although you don't need to watch it just to understand, the point I'm making here. Point here is that if you thought you'd be getting something out of a situation that you've been pouring your energy into, there's no um, consideration for you. There's nothing that somebody is going to acknowledge. You can still keep at it, but maybe don't volunteer for additional overtime, or maybe don't go above and beyond what everybody else is doing, because you may not get anything out of it. If you're a great worker, good on you, but don't work with the intention of getting something out of it. The example I gave was with work because I think that's the easiest place to envision something like this happening. This could be in social situations as well. Maybe you have a partner or somebody that you just newly um, got involved with, and maybe they are, bleeding you dry of your resources, like your money, things like that, and you think that you're getting somewhere with that individual, only to find out that, they really don't have any intention of being anything more than maybe something that you think. One more example, it's kind of long, so bear with me here. There's this book I like. It's called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. There is this guy who he's an author, and he's trying to publish a book, and he's trying to publish it through like a university, and he has to kind of jump through some hoops and hurdles, and he ends up taking a course or a class to somehow get closer to the individuals that he needs to get close to get his book published. And eventually, it turns out that they're not going to publish his book, but yet he still remains in that same class. And it's almost like at one point, he kind of stops and realizes, like, what am I doing here? Like, why? Like, what is the point of why I set every event in motion? I think this is just a wake up call for you, wherever you are in your situation, where you're doing a lot of effort in the hopes that it's going to pay out, just understand that the person you are waiting for a payout from is not does not currently have the intention of paying anything out. You know, this doesn't mean that you probably won't get anything paid out, but it means that the way that things are as of right now, that you may not receive a payout. This could be a chance for you to maybe reassess, the relationship. So for example, hey, you know, um, you're the interim supervisor because there's no bosses at the moment, and then you're working really hard, but you're still getting paid at, a regular worker level. If that's the situation, and there's no intention of making you the permanent manager, then maybe you need to say, hey, you know what? I understand that I'm doing a lot and I'm not going to keep doing the work for somebody else if I'm not going to get compensated fairly. Maybe you need to start making some sort of revision. Um, please don't take this as advice. You know your situation best, but just understand the possibility that as things currently are, you might not receive a regular um, situation that will favor you unless maybe you get involved and say something. Again, though, I'm not giving you direct advice. This is just, you know, opening up your mind to the possibility that you might not get a payout. And if you choose to do something with that, that's on you. So don't hold me accountable to that. Hey, so that's the end of it. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if this resonated with you. Also, let me know what other tarot readings you'd like to see on this channel. I do personal tarot readings as well. Check the link in the description. And one final thing, when it comes to tarot readings, I don't believe that your life is set in stone. You make your own fate. I think with tarot, you're able to really get a feel for as things currently are, should you not do anything about it, this is most likely what the outcome will be. However, we are able to change our destiny. We're able to change what direction we take our life in. And I think with tarot, it's a perfect way to check in and see where we currently are. Like for myself, I know that it's extremely hard to change um, like patterned way of thinking and behaving. It's almost like you're a creature of habit and you're kind of just going to go whichever way the river takes you, whichever way the flow takes you. So I think you are able to affect a situation, even if it's headed towards an unfavorable situation. So when you hear things that maybe aren't that positive, you're not doomed. It's more of a wake up call. It's like you're driving down a road and you see a road that says, tight bends up ahead. You're not gonna you're gonna be fine, provided you heed the warning and adjust accordingly. If you just keep, moving full speed ahead, then there may be some damage. There may be some situation that is going to be unfavorable for you. Thank you again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.